I am very happy to introduce Elvira Dyangani, who's a very good friend and also a researcher and curator and thinker into contemporary visual culture that I admire dearly. And Elvira is lecturer currently, very newly actually, in visual cultures at Goldsmiths University in London, and curator of the upcoming Göteborg International Biennial in 2015. She was the curator for the last 3 years, and she was the face of the Tate International program supported by Guarantee Trust Bank. And in the context of that, she curated a series of exhibitions across the board and has curated the mega exhibition on Ibrahim El-Salahi, a visionary modernist. Her interests include the politics of representation, social and urban imaginaries, and the role of artists in making history. And she is currently completing a PhD at Cornell University. Please welcome Elvira. The panel is announced as to take place in conversation with Sammi Baloji. Sammi, unfortunately, is not with us today because the United Kingdom Foreign Service didn't consider him, worthy enough to come to London for one day, so they didn't give him a visa.
They consider a risk
for
him to stay in London.
Exactly. But Sammi will be part of this conversation all the while through other means with video and other technology that we put in place for him to be part of the conversation. Elvira will be in conversation with Osei Bonsu. You all who have been to the forum last year and this year have seen Osei a lot. Osei works closely with me to elaborate the forum program. He's a young independent curator and writer based in London, and he contributes regularly to journals and magazines such as NKR and The New African and Art Review. And he's currently working on his first catalog essay on Milan Expo's art and food exhibition curated by Germano Celant, and as well as other artist focus projects. So, and namely an extensive series of interviews. He's co-author of Out of Bounds, an artist book produced in collaboration with Ibrahim Mahama that will be published by One Star Press in December 2014. I wish you a very interesting session. Thank you.
So welcome everyone and good afternoon. Apologize for my voice and for some moments that you will see me going through my Kleenex stuff, but I have been feeling a bit sick these days. Oh no, you won't see me. Can we have a little bit of light until we, thank you. Hey, I'm back again. So as I was saying, I'm sorry and I apologize, but since the beginning, we received this fabulous invitation of Koyo. It's a pleasure for me to be here, to be back in 154. It has been an incredible experience last year and this year. I'm very happy to see the fair being so successfully received. One of the things that I remember we talked on the first day of the forum last year was what's happened tomorrow, no? Because we have lived, and London particularly is well-resourced in many moments of shyness, let's say, and brightness of African art. But as I said somewhere else, I think one of the most important aspects of what is happening in the fair and what is happening with the attention that African art has been receiving in the past years is that it's becoming something ordinary. and losing that character of extraordinary, losing the feeling that it only happens once in a while. It's extremely important. The fact that you're here attending this forum, the fact that it's sold out constantly, I think is one of the proof that this is working. So thank you so much, and also congratulations, because I think this is also a prize for us all that are interested in African art, modern and contemporary African art. As Koyo was saying, late last week we learned that Sammi Baloji will not be present here. And because I knew that Osei was very interested in his practice, I said to him, why don't we make the artist present through different means? And I asked Osei to ask Sammi some questions. And what we are going to do today is to read those questions and see the responses that Sammi has sent us in a video, comment on those responses, and continue in a dialogue that I hope it brings us the artist's voice on his own practice and his projects outside his personal practice, but also some other, a larger conversation that he has with the structures such as the Lubumbashi Biennale or other kind of exhibitions that he had been taken part of. So I will ask Osei, I don't know if you want to say something about how you engage with this artist practice and perhaps launch the first two questions or three that you ask the artist.
Yeah, most certainly. So what's so interesting, as Elvira said, during 154 is for so many African artists who really have the chance to show here in London, it's kind of an affirmation of the fact that their practices are indeed valid, and what Forum seeks to do is to provide a critical context for dialogues around African art and related practices. But what was so important this year, and Koyo mentioned it in her introduction in the opening of the fair, is this idea that we're giving a very, very kind of close and intimate access to a specific practice, really through artist talks, which is what this was meant to be, but it's ended up being curators in dialogue with an artist who's virtually here. So the artist isn't present, but I think to a large extent, you know, the fact that his work is present upstairs and you can go and you can see it and experience it, and also the fact that he was included in our film program showing the work Memoir from 2007 is obviously also a key way of gaining access to his work. So it's not just about his physical presence, but we're obviously sorry he couldn't be here. So with the three questions, I'll go straight into them. So the questions that I sent Sammi, kind of thinking around some of the ideas in his work, specifically about its context of Lubumbashi, which I personally have no experience of, and I'm sure many of you don't either, so I'm in exactly the same position. But Elvira has a great deal of experience, which is, you know, why we're here. So the questions were, how is the history of your country, influenced the work, particularly in terms of industrial culture and colonial legacies? So a very general question. How did you become interested in the GIBCA means, the General Mind Society of Lubumbashi, in the context of memories and ruins, which are ever present in Sammi Baloji's practice? And I think the practices of other artists, maybe you could talk more about how it connects to other practices. And in what way does your work reflect the daily life of Congolese people and the past colonial influence in today's landscape? So it's thinking of his proximity to the past as an artist and how he's thinking through notions of history, proximity, kind of, and I think it relates very strongly to kind of Elvira's ethos, which is looking at how artists make history, how they're active in social discourse, and that's something we'll also expand on. So if we could run the videos now, that would be great. Thank you. And dim the lights. Thanks.
There is some. It's always happened. We had done it and it works really well, and now I don't know what it is. Shall we? Can I try? There you go. We cannot hear anything.
Baloji, and I would like to say thank you to 154 for this talk. So, for the first question, I grew up in a dictatorial regime with a unique vision directed by Mobutu and his government. At that moment, all the population was dominated by the regime. Even the opposition was completely destabilized
Okay. So yes, unfortunately, I was in my imagination. We could have Sammi on the other line, so then you will have questions for him at the end, and he will respond. But you will have to just ask this question to me, and if I can, I will respond with my experience and the kind of conversation that I have maintained with the artist. But as he was saying, it is extremely important for him to work with the city, with this urban change. He was born in 1978. Sammi studied communication. And as he was saying, he first started as a cartoonist. So for him was extremely important narrative, narration, storytelling is something very basic in his practice. Perhaps some of you were lucky enough to attend the exhibition When Harmony Went to Hell, the Congo Dialogues that took place in Ineva between January and March, where he presented some of the series that I'm going to introduce you here. Not these series, and I'm sorry that it's so bad. God, now I realize that blowing out they're a bit terrible. But you saw Memoir yesterday, I believe, where Sammi Baloji invited the choreographer and dancer Faustin Lignacula to somehow perform and give life to some of the characters that you could see here in the photographic project. Memoir is a series that he was doing from 2003 to 2006 and interrogate both, as he was talking about, let's say the archaeology left by colonialism, and in particular the archaeology left by the Jacamins in Lubumbashi, but also interrogating some of the characters that somehow within the narrative of colonialism were lost complete agency. And he wants to provide agencies to those characters, and that's one of the reasons why they are there, together with other dignitaries and other elements and moments of the past history of DRC, of Democratic Republic of Congo. And if you saw the video yesterday, you will also have engaged, apart from the incredible ways in which Faustin Lignacula embodied all that history in his somehow fragile, somehow extremely heroic body. No, I think for me he embodies the working class, the regular man, but at the same time he carries the wisdom of some of the elders. No? And if you have ever listened to Faustin Lignacula speak about why history and heritage is important for him, you will see how also him and Sammi engage in an understanding of the production of knowledge from the perspective of the local. So for both history and the history of Lubumbashi, the region of Katanga, but also the history of Congo, blackness, and the history of the continent and its diaspora are extremely important. And this is some of the things that we see, as I said before, in this series Memoir. One of the things that attracts me the most about these artists is that they somehow embedded what Michel Roth-Troyot called artisans of history. And with that, he meant, this is an Asian anthropologist that wrote a beautiful book called Silence in the Past, Power and the Production of History. And Michel Roth-Troyot says that artists are artisans that, beside the professional historians, are the ones capable of challenging notions and notion of history and history making. And I think for me, Sammi Baloji, as well as people like Kerry Mewins, Kerry James Marshall that you see in London nowadays, don't miss those shows if you have the chance, are people that engage with a narrative and a sense of history making and the production of history, the writing of history, that somehow does not overcome the history and the power that made the histories as such, but add complexity to those discourses and to that production. So in that sense, as I say, if one think about Michel Roth-Troyot's sense of history and the fact that any of us can be both narrator an actor of history. Sammi Baloji will embody that. This is one of the shots of the video memoir in 2000. Oh, we need this to be shrink. Sorry. If you have gone to Gallery Iman Fares upstairs, I don't even know in which wing. Now we are expanding. West Wing. Yeah. Okay. So perhaps you have seen a diptych. I will show you in a minute one of the diptychs that belongs to that series called Wesi. So most of us know memoir, as I say, 3 years of work. Sammi Baloji was working with memoir from 2003 and 2006, was seen in London, I think, for the first time in the exhibition Contested Terrain that was part of the Level 2 program at Tate Modern, an exhibition curated by my colleague Karen Greenberg with Nigerian artist, filmmaker, cultural entrepreneur Jude Akonye. And one of the most interesting aspects of that series is that he starts to explore elements of history and then the GIBCA mines. What you can see in the background of those images that I showed you before were the actual ruins of the mining system in Congo. Later on in 2009, Sammi started to think about how to engage with not only history, but with the present and with those individuals that, again, are sort of like are completely forgotten, let's say, or silenced by history and the news and the present. And he goes to Kolwezi, which is a city at the very far end of the region of Katanga, almost the very, very south of the country, and I start a conversation with some of the inhabitants and workers in the mine. This is what you have in the background. It's a very bad slide, but what you have in the background are the tents where some of these workers live, and he started to have a conversation with them about their living experience, their working conditions, etc. In a way, I mean, even if it's not as spectacular as memoir, Kolwezi as a series that is produced from 2010 onward is a series in which the artist shows more commitment, a strong commitment to the community that have been undermined to this mining system. So if in 2003 with the memoir we have this somehow a retrospective view of that system, we have here the present. And what he does with that series, and this is a diptych similar to the one that you have upstairs, is that these are the tents, as you can see there, where some of these people live. And inside the tent, most of these workers have these kind of images that you see here, or the one you will see upstairs, right? These are posters, postcards, illustration made by China, made in China, sorry, that refers to, you know, far away, almost exotic, imaginative places where somehow in those tents without windows, this is somehow like the only perspective towards the future that some of these workers have. And it's interesting that he, of course, creates a visual conversation between the way that this, the sort of the living condition of all these workers and a possible, almost dreamy landscape that one can find in this photograph. Let's see what else I have. If you saw the show in Iniva, perhaps in the ground floor you remember there was one little room in which the artist has this visual conversation that you have here with photos of the past and the present. And this is a result of a residency. This series is called Albums. And this is the result of a conversation that Patrick Mudekeresa, who is a scientist by training, but a writer by heart, and is one of the members and the general secretary of PICHA, which I will talk a little bit later. PICHA is the organization, the artist-run organization that created the Lubumbashi Biennale, and they work together in the Tervuren Museum, which is a famous museum in Belgium, where you have is an anthropological museum where some of the findings of the Congo, both nature but also natural heritage, historical and artistic heritage is concentrated. Part of that is also this series here, in which the artist also creates a dialogue with this archive photograph, with some of the archival photograph, but from the time of the war, the Civil War. And I think we go now to a second video. There you go. Oops, I'm gonna just. Can we make sure that, can we turn the lights down and make sure that the sound enters right away? I think, there you go. No, something's happening. Okay, I'm gonna go back. Let's see. So, 1, 2, 3, are you ready? It's okay? It's okay now? If I click, it will start? Okay.
Right. So, for the third question, my work is not necessarily a documentary approach, even if the starting point could be related to the past, present, or current events of my country. It is a kind of long-term project focused on a topic. It can be architecture, or urban plan, mining exploitation, or slavery, racism. I'm quite interested on how things are linked, connected. We are all connected, and I think Lubumbashi is connected with the rest of the world, and this part of the world. I used to make research or collaborations with scientists, art historians, architects, anthropologists, artists, and at the end I'm trying to express what I've observed with an artistic approach. In this way, my work doesn't just talk about the past. It can be also part of a future, in a way. Of course, the colonial past has an influence, not just in my country, in Europe too, or America, or other continents. In the 90s, Biennial wrote about the invasion of Africa, or how to decolonize Africa. Currently, Ashim Nebe and other intellectuals are thinking and writing on how Africa has to define itself in our new era. And this new definition of itself includes many fields such as politics, economy, art, philosophy. And the new landscape is quite open, and people are thinking about the relationship that they can have with China, with Asia, India, and it's more about the globalization and less about the past. And it's quite complex.
Okay, I think that says it all. We're gonna go. You ask him another question. Do you wanna?
Yeah.
Which somehow follows up this.
And then we're going to play another video, right? Yes. Okay, so the next question would be, do you see artists as playing an important role in history making? And if so, to what extent does your practice take up this responsibility? And then the next one, could you talk about your experience of organizing the 2012 Rencontres Biennale, the third edition of the Biennale of Lubumbashi in the DRC, right?
Okay, perhaps I should say that, as I was saying before, well, he says it's a little bit. He works collaboratively most of the time. Sometimes his photography is part of a conversation that the artist had with an anthropologist, with an architect, with cultural entrepreneurs in institutions. And one of the most interesting collaborations that he had has been with Patrick Mudekeresa. And this collaboration started in 2006, where they found a Picture Art Center. I believe I have some images that I will show you later. And the idea is that they will create a place, an art center, a cultural center that will offer local artists, writers, musicians, and cultural activists a place to work, to observe, to interact, and to develop new artistic strategies. No? It's a very small center, but include a graphic art and silk screen workshop, a small exhibition gallery, as well as a sound recording studio. And what is interesting about that is that the way that they have operated is to create something that responds organically to the environment, to the need of the artists that were engaged in the conversation. And also, of course, GIBCA has many conversations with other, let's say, non-government structures around the world, like Raw Material or Dual Art, in La Rotonde des Arts, CCA Legos, just to name a few. Sorry. So we're going to go to listen his last introduction, and then I will show you some images of what it was the Lubumbashi Biennale. Yes, let's listen to him, and I will add some elements to what he's telling us here.
I think art is linked with the society, and yes, it has such an important role in history making and in the society. My work is not just limited on my own artistic practice; it is more extended. I interact with people, I dialogue on and with my society. The Lubumbashi Biennale is somehow an extension of my own work. When I was invited the first time in Belgium or in Paris for the Biennale and the Bamako Biennale in 2007, I started to discuss with Simon on how we can bring this kind of events in Lubumbashi. And 1 year later, we started the first edition. And then Simon came in 2010 and proposed to bring this event into the street. We converted conceptually the city into a museum, just because in Lubumbashi there are no spaces dedicated to art. Not many, maybe 2 or 3. So why can we make art just for those empty places? I'm saying that because we have more than 2 million people who are living in Lubumbashi, but it's maybe less than 1% of the population which is interested or can have access to art. But the people need it, so let's go to them. That's what we are trying to do in Lubumbashi. We are trying to connect art with the population and also in another way bring the population to art. So it is always a challenge. I remember a conversation that we had with Elvira when she was preparing the third edition. Simon told her that it would be a guerrilla, and it was, because there is nothing. I mean, there are people, interesting people, but without a strong infrastructure and support in art field, what can you do? Then the curator is not just a curator, the artist is not just an artist, or a guest. We are all human beings, all linked by art, and we are trying to make art and giving meaning of what we are doing to who can be interested or attracted. And maybe this is art.
It's so cool. So these are some of the images of the presentation. Thank you. Sorry. And thank you so much for preparing this for him. It was really, really great. I'm going to run very quickly to some of the images, and perhaps we can have like 10 to 15 minutes questions. This is, Sammi was saying, this was a guerrilla project, more in my case than in the case of Simon, although he went without hitch. As many of you, I think, know, we're supposed to celebrate the Lubumbashi Biennale in 2012, but it didn't happen at the time. We did then a workshop in which we interrogated why a Biennale was necessary, and then celebrated the Biennale only last year. But as I was saying, they engaged with the entire city. You have seen here, what they did was to present some of the photographers in the public space, but also to occupy some of the few, as Sammi was saying, spaces for art display in the city of Lubumbashi. It had an incredible success between critics and audiences. It's incredible because when you see that it's a Biennale that people claim, and I think this is the most successful aspect that, or whatever, once organize a Biennale, this is one of the things that you really, really long for. No? And even though some images doesn't seem to reflect that because it seems to be very, very limited audience, they are incredibly successful. And above all, the Lubumbashi Biennale, and I'm not gonna talk a lot about the images, we can go through it, but basically you will see images that belongs to our presentation until some of the latest project. This is in Picha. But I wanted to say that Biennales in Africa, and some of my colleagues, Elisa Tangana and Smooth and Adel Kader, realized that last year, Christine Giene also, that were working in the Biennale de Dakar. And what is interesting is that I believe that more than in any other place, Biennales in Africa are laboratories of experimentation. And it's very interesting, I think, because they are committed strongly to audience development, because they also committed to capacity building. So it's not about only displaying art, but in sort of like trying to engage with some students and professionals that can then develop elements of sort of some of the different roles in what it means to create a Biennale. This is also the first presentation in Picha. And I think that sense of organicity is one of the most successful aspects of the Biennale. As I was saying, Picha means picture in Swahili, and that's the name that they have given to the institution. It's formed also by other artists and writers and musicians, and we were installing the exhibition with them. All the structure that you saw were all these sort of like placemate for the photograph that you saw in the edition in 2010 were completely destroyed for the next occasion. So when I arrived to Lubumbashi 2 weeks before, they told me that we couldn't do the presentation in the public space. So what we decided to do is to occupy the interior space. This is like a photo album. I'm sorry, but I thought that it was very interesting. I mean, I presented on the Lubumbashi Biennale for the first time early this year. And for a year, I think I couldn't speak about it because it was so hard and I had put so much energy. So the moment that I started looking at those images, and I said, this is the best way that one can talk about the Biennale, actually. This is some of the images of the work of Sammi in Iniva, but that was first done for Lubumbashi. And as I say, because we couldn't occupy the public space, we decided to occupy public spaces within the city, opening, for instance, the town hall for so many of the citizens and the visitors of the Biennale. This is in the fine art school that also had a high school and a primary school, and we use some of the classroom as a space of display, and we have an incredible interaction with all the students. These are some of the results of the workshop that we did there. Extremely complex. If you are interested, we can talk about the sort of like the different programs that we have in the Biennale, but I thought that perhaps it's better to illustrate and then we cannot go through all the images. But I thought that probably for many of you, this is the first time that you see some of the result of our project. We didn't have money to frame the work. We didn't have access to major galleries. So what we decided to do, this is Katia Kameli, for instance. So what we decided to do is just to hang everything the best we could. And it was incredible, the engagement of both students, professors, visitors, etc. Here you have Patrick de Queresa and Michel Soboski talking about Ponte City. I don't know if you have heard about that project. It's a project he's been working for the past 10 years. Was presented in Paris recently and in Antwerp. And it reflects on the stories on the stories of the inhabitants of a building in Johannesburg that is called Ponte City. And one of the things that I thought that was very interesting and I wanted him to talk is one particular story that was about a family of Congolese, a Congolese family, that were coming directly from Lubumbashi. So he told that story there. Gulembago, one of the local artists. This is the aspect that the presentation have in the school. This is the TV windows and doors, the project of, part of the Michel Soboski's project in Ponte City. And now I think there is an image that is super heavy. Let's see. We also did, we also did a walk about the city with Professor Johan Lagae. Here you see most of the artists, Guy Tillin, Angela Ferreira, Katia Kameli, Sabelo Malangeni somewhere there, Jeffrey, XF Jevre, also presented here in 154. I mean, many of these artists are probably. So Johan took us around the city and we explore, I just realized I haven't told you what was the project about. We entitled the project Enthusiasm. And Enthusiasm was also, it takes the name from Jean-François Lyotard, Readings of History, the Lessons of History by Immanuel Kant. And the way he sees history at the time, he's looking at May 68 in Paris and thinking how the politics are incapable of changing the world. And he's thinking that perhaps art or the change can only succeed through an aesthetic movement, through aesthetics. And he thinks also that there is an engagement between us that observe these events as it happen to the public, but also he sees enthusiasm as a way to connect and to blur the distance between participants and author of any kind of project. So with that same initiative, we decided to name the project after this reading of history in particular. So this is the Museo National de Lubumbashi, where there is Galerie d'Art Contemporain, and we presented here Guy Tillin Avenue Patrice Lumumba series. If you go to the Barbican these days, there is a show on architecture, and there is a selection of this series there. We presented the entire series. This is the work of Lara Burman in another of the spaces. This is Picha. This is actually the cultural center that I was mentioning before. And this is the project of Sabelo Malangeni there, Ghost Towns. We also did a series of projections in the public space and also in some of the venues. And this is Sven Agustin and Spectres presentation. With the support of Triangle Art and Gasworth and Alessio Antonelli, and all his team, we developed a conference on art and social change and invited other non-government structures to come and present their projects. So also we made the community in Lubumbashi to understand that Picha wasn't something, I mean, it's exceptional in the context of Katanga and Congo, but there were other practitioners, other cultural producers that are trying to do the same in Kinshasa, Nairobi, Kampala, Johannesburg, Cape Town, and many, many other places. But these were some of the presenters there. And it was really special because we have an audience that were completely mixed. And at a certain moment, we realized that there were at least 20 young kids that were living in that neighborhood and that didn't have money or resources to go to school. And they came and attended the talk for the 2 days. And it was so incredible, and we decided that some of the presenters speak Swahili. So we did a trilingual series of sessions. So then the students, are very, very young, from 5 to 10 years old, could attend to and understand the talks. We did something that for me is incredibly moving. I actually cried like a baby. I had to confess. And it's that in the last day of the Biennale, they invite journalists, but also all the audience to say what they think. I mean, the last day of the Biennale, the last day of the first week of the Biennale, they invite audience to say what they feel or what they think about the Biennale, how they think the Biennale can progress. And that is extremely encouraging and engaging. So you have people from the city telling you what they want to see, how they engage with the art, how some of the things that we had done there had changed, what they think about their own society and the rest of the world. And for me, there are two very emotive moments. One was this, the occupation that we did of this building. Lubumbashi is a city that was built in the colonial times as an Elizabeth bill, and it was created almost like Algiers and other French or Belgian cities, in which you have the native space and the European space. And what that means in a place like Lubumbashi is that you have double institutions that are sort of repeated. So you have a theater that we saw in some of the images before, that was the theater in the European area, and you had this theater that used to be the one in the native area. And it's completely occupied now. It's an occupied building for families. It hasn't worked, I think, since the 60s. It's completely in ruins. But we presented one of the productions of the Biennale there, which was the work of Norwegian artist Bodil Furu. So it's a very small Biennale, but we produced a film. We did a lot of presentations, etc. And this is some images of Code Minière. That was the film that Bodil produces in collaboration with Picha and with some writers in Lubumbashi. The last piece I want to bring you is the work by Mozambican artist, Lisbon-based Angela Ferreira. She produces this beautiful piece that was part of a larger conversation that the artist had, both with Lubumbashi, but also with some of the holders of the Colonial Archive, a Jesuit Brotherhood in Lubumbashi. And there she found a series of letters written by the miners. And one in particular was a letter in which he was saying goodbye to his mom. And she invited these singers from Lubumbashi to sing the song, to sing the letter as it was a lullaby, a song. And this is what you see. So basically, they were standing on top of the source. We were illuminated by this sculptor, almost like in a Flavian-like way. And then you have here then singing and throwing away the lyrics of that song that was made by this miner. And that is the last slide that I have, and I think I consumed my time.
Right, yeah.
But we will have time for...
Well, we will have time for questions, but I wanted to kind of cover a few things. I thought that was a kind of feast of knowledge, and for most of us who didn't get a chance to visit and got to see your wonderful photo album of memories and encounters and experiences, that was an incredibly potent presentation. So I wanted to go over some things. If we get right back to Sammi's work, yes. I mean, it doesn't seem to be accidental that you're collaborating with an artist that ultimately feels incredibly committed to presenting the historical condition, that to a large extent is completely transfixed by the photographic image and the potentiality of the photographic medium. Something you didn't really speak a great deal about is exactly why he used photography as his primary medium for those who perhaps, well, I don't think he spoke about it. I mean, he started as a graphic artist, but where do you think that kind of close fascination in archival representation photography comes from?
So let's leave this, because we could go back. Well, it's true that as he says in a moment that he started as a cartoonist, and he did communication, so photography, film, were things that he always considered as possible medium to engage with a narrative of what it was the present of the DRC. What happened to Sammi is that he, somebody lent him a camera, and he had two people in his life that have been extremely important. One was the former director of the French Institute in Lubumbashi that invited Sammi to create, to help him for a guide and a book that they were doing about the city of Lubumbashi. And then he started to make this photography of the city. But also he had a conversation, a larger conversation with Mayaya, who was a photographer in Lubumbashi that holds most of the archive, Hughes Mayaya, that holds most of the archive that you see in Memoir. So both they look at sort of like this attention to the city and the city urbanscape and the archive of that memory of the city of Lubumbashi were fundamental for him to begin his practice as a photographer.
Okay, and then I think on another level I was just sort of wanting to touch on this question of kind of activating a historical memory, and you know, you speak a lot about this role of the artist in history making, and in fact in my question I referred to it as a responsibility, which I think it indeed is. But I wonder if you've seen, through presenting his work in the context of the Lubumbashi Biennale, people actually finding his work to be educational, or in some way being informed by narratives that they would not have otherwise encountered.
Well, one thing to say is that he always has been very reluctant to present his own work in the Biennale. So what you saw before, and I think this is the image, this is here because he was a participant of the workshop. He had never had displayed his work within the Biennial as an artist participating in the Biennial. Right. He was part of one of the workshops that was dedicated to architecture and photography, and that's why you see this work. So, sort of responding to both your initial question and the second, there is a strong tradition within Congolese culture and knowledge to look to themselves. The Belgian colonization may sort of like somehow erase most of the agency of some of the individuals and community in Lubumbashi, and for people like Sammi, Patrick, it's also about this social responsibility. It's also about not being anymore the subject of somebody else's work, but being the narrator and actor of their own practice, gaining the ownership of that. And in many ways, what proved the Biennale in all instances is that they organize the Biennale, but it's the Biennale of the people in Lubumbashi. And perhaps, as he was saying, there is a 1% of the communities that goes to museum, but there were so many people during a week that attended the events that we did, which were somehow we were always trying to sort of like make almost the thresholds between the cultural institutions and the street almost invisible. So then people won't feel threat to access to spaces that otherwise they will feel so detached to their day-to-day experience. So I think, again, going back to your question, is that I think that is important, is not seen, I mean, it's so curious. One can only know these scenes when you explore them by heart, right? If we see a Sven Augustinen movie on Spectres, right? And we see the way that he engaged with the notion of history with this crazy man that is a historian, but at the end is absolutely fascinated about where Lumumba was buried. We see it in the context of London, for instance, or Brussels. The question we ask these artists are completely different to the questions that were asked in the context of Lubumbashi. Yeah.
And then my final question is one regarding the aesthetics of Sammi, because I'm not sure that you noticed that progressively his works become, I guess, I'd say more experimental in kind of how he's using certain visual devices. And I know this was so much about the social and about history making that we somewhat neglected an aesthetic discussion. But I think, you know, just in terms of those works that we have upstairs, and the series escapes me, you know, the work where he's juxtaposing. they have an incredibly kind of superficial look to them, and I think that is this kind of strange thing for him, because there's a sort of rawness and a certain, I don't know, there's a certain kind of archival aspect to the way he's looking at images. Those new images seem to be so much more about newness and about the new and about a kind of projection from outside of what Africa might be or its context. And
well, I think there are two things that I will quickly deny from what you're saying now. One is that the fact that it's not superficial at all. And the problem is that, and if you ask me, I would have said to Imam Fares, don't present these pictures here, because you cannot understand the context, and this is a pity. And also what I had done doesn't explain you the context. No. It's something very critical in the life of an artist, because I mean, you had talked about certain things that perhaps could look very literal, but are literal because you are seeing them at the time that I explained them to you.
Exactly.
The first time that Kolwezi was presented was in the context of the new season of the KVS in Brussels, which is a National Flemish Theatre. And KVS has a long tradition of a conversation between Congo, or the memoir or the memory of Congo in Belgium, and the Belgian culture. KVS is also sit in a neighborhood very close to where the Congolese community live, but also in an area almost, I would say, in a border with a part of the city that is not so funny to walk around if you don't know it. Do you know what I mean? So what was interesting about Kolwezi is that all of a sudden you have these, at least I think 8 of these conversations between the people that live in these tents and these diptychs. And it's very important because if you think about all the Congolese that we see in archival photography, nobody even knows their names. They don't have agency. No. So what Sammi did with this project is to provide that agency. Perhaps, yes, it's more literal than anything else that he had done so far. But it's also an attention to the archive. And it's not an archive of the past, but an archive of the present. So you could see all this was displayed in the public space, in banners that were occupying the facade of the theater. And also you could access the theater and then enter in a conversation with those images and other works that the artists have presented.
Exactly. Okay, well, we can open out to questions. So if anyone has a question, just raise their hand and wait for a mic. And then if you could
There's
just...
somebody there.
Oh, yes, state your name briefly.
Do we need to wait for the mic or something?
Yep, is there a mic? Okay, I think one's on its way. If you could raise your hand, just so we know. Okay, one here.
Yeah.
You know, there's one here. I hope it... Yeah, sure.
Hi, my name is Mabrat Taraka. I'd like to thank you for this very interesting presentation. I've just got 2 basic questions. The link between Lumumba and Lubumbashi. Was Lumumba from present-day Lubumbashi? And how often does this event take place? I assume it's every 2 years. And that's really a very basic question.
What was the first question, sir?
Is there a link between Lumumba and Lubumbashi? You know, Lumumba, Patrick Lumumba, the person and the place. And when will this event that you were part of take place next?
Well, just perhaps because I'm a little bit sick, I pronounce it incorrectly. But one thing is Patrice Lumumba, and then the other is the city of Lubumbashi. So in that sense, there is no relationship with the name. The relationship, and I don't have this picture with me, but if you have seen a spectre from Agostinen, you know that Elizabeth Biel, and that actually hits you the minute that you arrive to the airport in Lubumbashi, when it was called Elizabeth Biel. Near Elizabeth Biel is where Lumumba is supposed to be buried. And if you were in the show at Iniva, you could have seen an image where somebody is showing the photographer where Lumumba is buried. And then the Biennale happens every 2 years, so they are now working with artist and curator Toma Muteba for the next edition of the Biennale that will take place next year, I believe.
I mean, I assume I can go online, but it's new to me. So.
I think they're going to do it in October, but I cannot say for certain. I'm happy to put you in touch with them so then you can check it out. Yeah. There are two at the back.
What impact do you think this was on the current political situation in the Congo?
What impact of the Biennale? Very minimal, I would say, very minimal. One of the things that we had tried to do, which I think it goes in parallel to the current conditions, political, economical, and social, which was the Code Minier, for instance, was a larger conversation about the environmental impact of mining system in the landscape in Congo, but also in relation to, to the damage that certain kind of industry does to the world. So that was, in that particular documentary, we have some of the representatives of the government, both of Katanga and the central government, responded to the artists and writers' question. And it was a very heated debate where we have some professional, some journalists there supporting some of the conversations that Bodil Furo initiated with her film. On the other hand, we had to not to develop some of the events because we knew that they could be of a controversial nature for the local government. But other than that, what we presented was in line to or the vision that some artists had of the current situation. I just remember that, for instance, we invited to the conference an artist that is one of the members of Collective Sadi. A Collective Sadi is an artist-run institution in Kinshasa. They're also more involved in social activism. But in general, as I said before, as an artist, yes, you can add complexity to production making, but you're never going to change it. Or you will change some aspect of it. You will change the perception of some of the people within it. You are an incredible, you produce an incredible tool that can be the vehicle of many people's claims and protests. You can do all of that, but you still are, unless you do as some people did in the 80s in Senegal and form a national party, you remain in a very specific realm, which is the realm of culture, which is the realm of art. And I think sometimes artists try to go back and forth with this, and perhaps you have an impact locally, but I will say in the larger spectrum of things, you add more complexity than you actually have an influence in something that has to change the course of a country.
And I think it bears an interesting parallel to 68,
yes,
which is what you mentioned. Okay.
Hi, I'm Lisa Fadat. Elvira, while you were talking, I was thinking about this, in the context of this perpetual lack of framing, lack of financing and lack of resources, the format of the biennial, this expectation that it's set up every 2 years. And as you know, in the case of the Johannesburg Biennial, which went up in 95 and then in 97 and then never again. Yeah, 95 and 97. And to some extent played into the hands of critics and cynics, art isn't feasible, that kind of thing. So, I really enjoyed this presentation, and I'm really interested in the way you approached the biennial, that you took it out of a main locality into the streets, into sort of disused buildings. And I was wondering about the funding of the biennial. Does it make it, in a way, cheaper? Is it feasible? Are we going to have this in 2 years again? And why do we have this? And also this format of the biennial, which keeps cropping up, because it does create an expectation which then often is not met, unfortunately. Yes. And which does play into the hands of critics, so I'm wondering about funding.
And I really appreciate that you say that, because one thing about the structure that was created to to produce the Johannesburg Biennales that is immense. And there was somebody that was talking about a certain sense of precarity as being the leading, sort of like the organizing principle, and the thing that made possible for the Biennale to succeed at the end. No? And I must say that as a curator, that is a nightmare. You don't want that, you know. We work, you have to think that we postponed the Biennale. And we made something that was supposed to happen in 45 days or 2 months, or 2 months. We decided to postpone it, and then made the program that I had thought for the Biennale to become the program that Picture will have for a year. So I decided to have 4 workshops. So these workshops were disseminated throughout the year, and all the conversations that we're supposed to have in that intense moment were also nurturing the general program of Picture, which I thought it was a very good, I mean, it was due to the circumstances, but also was something very interesting to think of, because at the end of the day, a Biennale cannot only be something like a mushroom that appears and then disappears, and then, you know, there is nothing in between, sort of like, I'm trying to write now about that, no? Who are the Biennales organized for, no? And how one can measure the impact the Biennales have, you know, when you are dismantling one and until the next one. What is happening in these 2 years or year and a half that you have in front of you? When that happened, we realized that we have very, very limited funds. The second year, in 2010, they have a strong support of the Rachel Forrest Foundation, which also is part of the forest mining industry group. That was denied the year that I was, so I don't even know how much money we spent, but I tell you, less than $50,000. So imagine, this is, and we did this, we managed to have artists. Of course, this is like extremely a collaborative experience, and it was about everybody putting their brains together. You know, there were moments that the office didn't even have money to do the photocopies. We couldn't print I mean, it's really guerrilla in all kinds of senses, but it's one of the most fulfilling experiences one can have. Because at the end of the day, it was all about the art. That's why I say I cried. Didn't cry for no reason. That's what I say, I cry at the end, because you realize how important it was that it took place. That was critical. And for so many people, they are waiting for the Biennale to happen once again. Because for them, it's the possibility to see things in a different language, somebody will say. Things about Lubumbashi or about Congo by other people. Things that artists that they have around them, that they think that they are doing childish project, all of a sudden discovering then who they are through this practice. They had the opportunity to talk to international artists, both from the continent and abroad. I mean, it's just incredible that happened. And then you realize that perhaps, of course, you would like it to be all pristine and beautiful, but at the end, what is really, really important is that the work is there, the artists are there, the people can engage with the conversation. You are in the when we were doing the Angela Ferreira's piece in the public space, we have all of a sudden a spontaneous audience of 300 or 400 people. You know, that concentrated in us 3, 4, 5, or 6 minutes. And that is extremely special.
I think it's also that out of that lack of resources emerges a certain kind of pragmatude that indeed influences a cultural strategy, which is something that this certainly is, you know, proof of.
You're absolutely right. I guess it's last question, right?
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. My name is Louis Long, and we talked a lot about the resourcefulness required. I'm curious to know, and that was executed. Curious to know, how did the experience and your learnings influence the, you know, your research and your outlook in terms of bringing together artists going forward? How did you change personally in terms of how you curate as a result of this experience, and not from a pragmatic resourcefulness standpoint, but from a creative standpoint?
Well, one thing I had to say is that when I started my career as a curator, I started as doing exhibitions in warehouses, in the corridors of the university. Oh. I almost started studying art history at the same time that we were presenting artists in the school. So I must say my beginnings were extremely humble. But then I was here at the Tate and full of resources. And when I arrived to Lubumbashi, it was like, ta-da! Of course, you know, this happened. Of course, you can engage with the art that way, you know, and it's really, exciting because it humbles you in many ways. Then you remember what is important about this and why you were doing this in the first place. So I will say, for me, what it was incredible about this experience is to see somebody like Sammi, for instance. Sammi is not here because he still holds a Congolese passport. And he does that even though he has been living for the past 10 years or more between Belgium and DRC. And he does this because ideologically and politically, he wants to still be involved in what happens in Lubumbashi. That could be a response to your question also. He wants to be involved in that. He wants to be part of that group or that society. So that's why, even if he has a wife and a kid that lives in Brussels, he's still Congolese for all the matter. And in a certain way, there's almost something poetic about him not being here because of those reasons, I would say. The only good thing about it. But you see people like him that is trying to do, like the first Lubumbashi Biennale, the second edition, the one that Simon Curator was mainly paid with Sammi's prize. You know, like Sammi got a prize in Bamako at the Rencontres in Bamako. So his prize was mainly dedicated to do this project. So when you see somebody that had that kind of commitment, of course I do a show that we can, just hang photos with clips. And of course I tell everybody else around me that they had to support that no matter what. So I think what you discover in this kind of project is exactly that. No? It's exactly the spirits and the reason why. Beyond all the rhetorics, the fabulous language, the expertise and the curatorial approach and the intellectual thing. And that's why I think I chosen to present this as a photo album. And I'm sort of with you in a conversation in my living room, and we're taking a coffee and we're seeing all these people, oh, look what happened, no? Because I think it was more important that all of that happened that way than anything else, right? And this, I think, is what I had tried to bring you here to.
Yeah, and you've indeed brought that. So thanks so much for coming. Our next session will be with Koyokuro and Zinazara. We were talking about the Boys' Quarters project in Nigeria, so I think that starts in... Okay, yeah, in about, half an hour, right, be back here. But we have to clear this room out. Thanks.